Something deeply troubling is unfolding right now, and most Americans are not being told the full story. While U.S. and Israeli forces continue their strikes on Iran in what the Pentagon calls Operation Epic Fury, a separate and far more dangerous drama is quietly playing out behind the scenes. Russia has been providing Iran with targeting information to attack American forces in the Middle East, including the precise locations of American warships and aircraft operating across the region. This is not speculation. This is not fringe commentary. Much of the intelligence Russia has shared with Iran comes from Moscow's sophisticated constellation of overhead satellites. And here is where it gets deeply uncomfortable for those of us watching carefully. When Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was asked directly about this on CBS's 60 Minutes, his response was, in its entirety, "We're tracking everything." That is either a reassurance or a warning, possibly both. Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt dismissed the reports entirely, claiming the intelligence sharing was not making any difference because the U.S. was completely decimating Iran. And when Fox News reporter Peter Doocy raised the matter directly with the president, Trump's response was to call it, on camera, a stupid question, and refuse to engage. Now, let us think carefully about what we are actually witnessing here. The U.S. operation against Iran currently involves more than 50,000 troops, more than 200 fighter jets, and 2 aircraft carriers. American servicemen and women are in harm's way every single hour. An Iranian drone struck a makeshift facility housing U.S. troops in Kuwait, killing 6 American service members. 6 Americans dead. And the question of whether Russian satellite intelligence guided those drones, that question is being waved away as a stupid thing to ask. Russia's advanced overhead surveillance network has allowed Iran to locate U.S. and Israeli assets with a precision Tehran could not possibly achieve on its own. Iran operates only a limited constellation of military reconnaissance satellites, wholly insufficient for tracking fast-moving naval assets across open water. Russia does not share that limitation. This is not peripheral assistance. This is the nervous system of Iran's entire precision strike doctrine being handed to Tehran by Moscow. Russia told Trump directly in a phone call that it had not shared intelligence with Iran. And U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff responded to that denial by saying, "We can take them at their word. Let's hope that they're not sharing. Let's hope." That is the official position of the United States government regarding the potential targeting of its own soldiers. Hope? What does this tell us? It tells us that the architecture of power in this conflict is far more complex than the administration is prepared to publicly acknowledge. Russia has emerged as an early winner of this war, benefiting from spiking oil revenues, reduced pressure on its Ukraine campaign, and a depletion of American arsenals that would otherwise be available to Kyiv. Moscow has every strategic incentive to keep this war going, to keep it costly, and to keep it quiet. This is the question Americans deserve an honest answer to, not deflection, not anger at reporters, not hope. Are American lives being endangered by Russian intelligence? And is this administration choosing silence over transparency? That is what we are going to examine carefully, methodically, and without flinching. Let us start with something that very few people in Washington are willing to say plainly. The relationship between Russia and Iran is not a new development. It is not a surprise. It is not something that emerged from nowhere the moment American bombs began falling on Iranian soil. This relationship has been building, consolidating, and deepening for the better part of a decade, and any honest analyst watching the trajectory of global power would have told you years ago that the moment the United States went to war with Iran, Russia would not simply stand aside and watch. And yet, somehow, official Washington appears to have been caught entirely flat-footed. Or, perhaps more accurately, official Washington does not want the American public to understand the full shape of what is happening right now. Because here is what we actually know. One American official described Russia's intelligence assistance to Iran as a pretty comprehensive effort. That phrase, comprehensive, is not a throwaway word. That is a word chosen deliberately by someone inside the American intelligence community who wanted people to understand the seriousness of what is unfolding. A comprehensive effort means coordination. It means systematic support. It means someone in Moscow made a deliberate, considered decision that helping Iran target American forces was worth doing, and worth doing thoroughly. And yet, when Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was placed directly in front of a camera and asked to address this, his entire response, the full, complete response of the Secretary of Defense of the United States of America was, "We're tracking everything." The American people can rest assured their commander-in-chief is well aware of who's talking to who. That is not an answer. That is a performance of confidence designed to avoid giving an answer. Now, I want you to think about this very carefully, because it is important to understand what Russia is actually providing here, and why it matters so profoundly. Iran has a small number of military satellites, which are wholly insufficient for tracking fast-moving naval assets across open water. Russia, by contrast, can draw on a large network of satellites and other data to provide the Tehran regime with information about American forces. What this means in practice is that without Russian assistance, Iran is essentially operating blind when it comes to locating American warships moving through the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea. With Russian satellite imagery, that changes entirely. Suddenly, Iran knows where the USS Abraham Lincoln is. Suddenly, Iran knows the flight corridors of American aircraft. Suddenly, the precision of Iranian drone strikes improves in ways that should alarm every single person paying attention in this country. And it is precisely this kind of precision that may well have contributed to the single most devastating event in this conflict so far, the drone strike in Kuwait that killed 6 American service members. Let me dwell on that for a moment, because I think it is in danger of being lost in the noise of the broader military campaign. 6 Americans died, not in Iran, in Kuwait. A drone found a makeshift facility where American troops were sheltering, and it hit its target. Now, we do not know, and the administration has been very careful to ensure we do not know whether Russian satellite intelligence guided that particular drone to that particular location. But we have a clear statement from multiple intelligence officials that Russia has been feeding Iran location data on American troops and assets. And we have an Iranian drone that killed American soldiers at a location where American troops were based. I am not drawing a direct causal conclusion. I am saying that the question deserves a serious and honest answer, and it has not received one. Now let us widen the lens, because Russia is not the only major power making calculations here. American intelligence also suggests that China may be preparing to provide Iran with financial assistance, spare parts, and missile components, though Beijing has stayed out of the war up until now. And this is where the geopolitical picture becomes genuinely complex, because China's interests in this conflict are not simple. China relies heavily on Iranian oil and has reportedly been pressuring Tehran to allow safe passage for vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. Beijing does not want this war. It disrupts oil flows. It introduces chaos into an energy market that China depends on. And yet, at the same time, Beijing clearly cannot afford to simply allow Iran, one of its most important energy partners and a cornerstone of its belt and road architecture in the Middle East, to be completely dismantled by American and Israeli military power. So China is walking a tightrope. It is cautious. It is calculating. But the direction of that calculation appears to be slowly tilting toward limited, quiet support. And here is the crucial insight that you will not hear in most mainstream coverage. Russia and China are not acting as reckless adventurers here. They are acting as rational strategic actors who understand that the American-led military campaign against Iran creates a historical opportunity that may not come again. A senior Russian source was candid enough to note that the escalation around Iran and the Gulf is already diverting attention from the war in Ukraine, and called that simply a fact. Think about what that means. Every American bomb dropped on Tehran, every American munition expended over the Persian Gulf, every American carrier group dedicated to Operation Epic Fury is a resource, an asset, and a piece of political attention that is not being applied to Ukraine. Russia does not need to fire a single shot at an American soldier to benefit enormously from this war. All it needs to do is quietly feed Iran the information Tehran needs to keep American forces engaged, keep the conflict costly, and keep Washington's strategic attention stretched to the breaking point. This is grand strategy. This is how great powers actually operate, not through dramatic declarations and direct confrontations, but through patient, deniable, calibrated interference that achieves strategic objectives without triggering a direct response. And the administration knows this. The intelligence community has said so clearly through multiple officials speaking to multiple news organizations. The Washington Post had it, CNN had it, NBC News had it, ABC News had it confirmed. This is not a fringe theory circulating on obscure websites. This is mainstream reporting based on American government sources inside the intelligence apparatus. And the official response from the White House was to call a Fox News reporter's question stupid and change the subject to college sports. What does that tell you? It tells you that the administration has decided, for reasons that are at least partially understandable from a tactical perspective, that publicly acknowledging Russian involvement would create political and diplomatic problems that they are not yet prepared to manage. If you formally acknowledge that Russia is helping kill American soldiers, you create enormous pressure to respond. You undermine the Trump-Putin diplomatic relationship that the administration has invested heavily in cultivating. You complicate the narrative of a clean, decisive American military victory over Iran. And so the choice has been made, quietly, but unmistakably, to manage this information rather than confront it openly. When Russia told Trump directly on a phone call that it had not been sharing intelligence with Iran, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's response was, "We can take them at their word. Let's hope that they're not sharing." That word hope is doing extraordinary work in that sentence. An American envoy, whose government's own intelligence community has confirmed Russian intelligence sharing with Iran, is expressing hope that Russia is not doing what America's intelligence community has confirmed Russia is doing. The dissonance there is not accidental. It is the official position. And so here we are. American troops are in a war zone. Russian satellites are, according to multiple American officials, feeding their enemy targeting data. Chinese support may be moving from the sidelines to the field. 6 Americans are already dead, and the Secretary of Defense tells us he's tracking everything. The White House press secretary tells us it's not making a difference, and the president tells a reporter it's a stupid question. This is the information environment in which the American public is being asked to support and understand a war being conducted in their name, with their tax dollars, and with the lives of their sons and daughters. And the question that needs to be asked, loudly, repeatedly, and without apology, is whether the people running this war are being fully honest with the people they are asking to trust them.